Illinois has a lot of promise as the highest ceiling Big Ten team, but they're now 4 games behind Sparty in the loss column. What happened on Thursday night?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Happy Friday morning. It's the only daily national college hoop show out there. We're your hosts. This is my guy, Andy Patton. I'm Isaac Shade, and you're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. Thanks so much for making us your first listen or watch of the day. And we want to remind you, you can catch every episode ad-free on Amazon Music. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Special shout out to all the everydayers joining us. And of course, the great Locked On College Basketball Discord members. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase, Mr. Andy Patton. Coming up on the show today, we've got Michigan at Purdue tonight. These teams are in second and third place in the Big Ten, so they're both trying to keep pace with Michigan State. Tomorrow, we've got 3 ranked matchups, including Auburn and Tennessee and Kansas and Houston. Boy, oh boy, it's going to be a great slate. We've got 9 other ranked teams on the road at unranked schools. Who can avoid those kind of bombshells, those landmines? We'll find all that out coming up on the show today, plus a whole bunch of other games. Somebody's got to win this Big East battle of one-win Big East teams, Andy. We'll look at all that. But first, we got to go back to last night where Maryland, a team that's not ranked but is a highly talented and capable team, goes to Champaign, Illinois against the number 17 Illini. No Tomislav Ivisic in this game for the Illini, but man, the Terps just run away with this thing in the end, Andy, 91-70. It's the Terps' first road win of the year, Andy. Could that be? Is that real?
Yeah, it was a really nice performance from Maryland here. Obviously, the lack of no Ivisic was a huge issue for Illinois, not just from a rebounding perspective. They only got out-rebounded by 4, so that wasn't the huge issue, but points in the paint just absolutely dominated by Maryland in this game. 62-34 was the overall score there, in huge part due to the 2 bigs for the Terps. Julian Reese had 27 and 17 in this game. He had 7 offensive rebounds. Derek Queen, 25 and 6. He also had 4 assists and 3 steals. And you could just tell the interior presence was not there for Brad Underwood's club without Tomislav in the mix. It was a huge problem for them. We've seen this Maryland team dominate in the front court before. This is not incredibly unusual for them. Derek Queen has been, he's slowed down a little bit as the team has gotten into consistent conference play, but was very, very good at the beginning of the year. Julian Reese, a veteran guy who totally has the capability of dominating in games like this. And that was enough for Maryland to get the W here. I was surprised it was their first road win as well. We knew that they had that debacle when they went out to the West Coast, lost to Oregon, which is not a bad loss, lost to Washington, which is more of a bad loss for Maryland. So for them to turn around, get a win over a top 20 team in Illinois on the road is a huge victory for them. We talked a lot about the front court. It had a lot to do with Reese and Queen and the lack of Ivisic in this game. But we'd be remiss if we did not mention Jacoby Gillespie, who has been the straw that stirs the drink for this Maryland club. He had 15 points in this one. He had 8 assists and just 1 turnover. He also had 3 steals on the defensive side of the ball. Just a really nice, steady performance from a player who's been that good, who's been that guy for this team for a while and just hasn't really gotten a ton of praise, a ton of notoriety for it. But they don't win this game without him. Maybe they win this one without him because they played so well in the interior, but they're not in this mix. They're not over 500 in conference play without the way that Jacoby Gillespie has played, and he had a huge part in this game as well.
Yeah, and that's such a great point because there's so many notable guards around the country that are doing it, right? And I think Gillespie has maybe been overlooked. Some part of that is because Maryland hasn't been as elite. But with a wink and a nod, I'll say, not all Belmont transfers have worked out this year. But Gillespie, man, he's really been doing it as he's transferred up, getting 14 and almost 14 and a half points a game, shooting 43% from 3 on a high volume, 5.5 attempts a game, killing it at the free throw line, 87.5%. He's getting 4.3 assists, 1.8 steals, just really, really helping out this club. And look, I know they're not ranked, but as you were talking about, there is so much talent here that as Queen continues to grow as a freshman, as they really figure things out, there's a lot of possibility here. And I think this is a big moment for them picking up this road win. And it was funny in the second half, Andy, they get out, Maryland does, to this 11-point lead. Illinois cuts it all the way back down, but then they just can't keep it, right? And then Maryland pushes right back out, and down the stretch, they just kept expanding. And before you know it, it's a 21-point victory when it's all said and done. And so kudos to Coach Willard's club for doing this. You talked about the points in the paint domination. The points off turnovers, 27-4 for Maryland. Fast break points, 17-3. And so they dominated some of these statistical categories, and yet they did basically nothing from three. Their first three-pointer of the game, Andy, was with like 12 minutes to go. So you win a game like this resoundingly on the road while not doing it from outside. Indiana's upset about that. And, it's a crazy thing. So big win for the Terps. Surprises me to think about. But when you look at the Big Ten standings, these two teams are now tied at 5-4 in the Big Ten. I would not have guessed Illinois has fallen that far, but as I teased in the cold open, they're now 4 games off the pace. And while to some extent we think they might be the best team from a ceiling standpoint, these games that they had to play without Yakichonis hurt. Now having to play this one without Ivisic, which we don't know, could that have gotten them over the top, Andy? It's tough to point to. But Illinois got now a pretty big hole to dig out of to try to catch up to Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, etc.
Well, we got a couple other Thursday games we want to get to here quickly. We had a ranked team, Memphis, hosting Wichita State in the AAC. The Tigers win this game. It was pretty ugly. They won it by 8, 61-53. They had to go on a clinching 12-0 run in the final 4.5 minutes to get the W here. But this is the kind of game that, frankly, Penny Hardaway's team lost in the past. Like, for them to go out and play kind of crappy in the first half and let this Wichita State team hang around and really hold a lead for most of the game, and then to actually finish it off and get the W, that's a testament to some improvements from the coaching staff from Penny and his group. It's a testament to PJ Haggerty, who had a great game, 22 points on 8 of 11 shooting in this game. This team has the guard depth, the experience to pull off wins like this when in the past they weren't able to do so. We also had a couple results in the WCC. St. Mary's was undefeated coming into this game against San Francisco, had not lost a game in conference play, but had played the bottom half of the WCC. So everybody was kind of waiting to see, what is this Gales team going to look like when they actually play one of the better teams in the league? Well, no problem whatsoever for Randy Bennett's team. 20-point victory over San Francisco, 71-51. At one point, they just decided, well, we're just going to stop letting you score, and held San Francisco scoreless for like a 6-minute stretch, something like that. Just an absolutely dominant performance for them. They're now undefeated in conference play, have a 2-game lead over the Zags and Santa Clara, looking very comfortable for the Gales to potentially win the WCC again. But they do have a very tough schedule. They're taking on Washington State on Saturday in Pullman. They also got Santa Clara on the road, Gonzaga, San Francisco on the road, at Oregon State, Santa Clara, Washington State. Their next 6 games, 4 of them are quad 1, 2 of them quad 2. Good stuff coming the way for the Gales. And then speaking of 2 of those teams, Santa Clara thrashes Washington State 93-65 is the final there. The Broncos 11-2 over their last 13 games after really struggling early in the year. They're now 6-2 in conference play. They got wins over Gonzaga, Washington State, San Francisco, and Oregon State. The backcourt of Adama Alpha-Ball, Carlos Stewart, and Tyree Bryan, who dropped 35 against the Zags last week, is a very good and underappreciated backcourt in college basketball. This team's slow start to the season probably has them and the have to win the WCC tournament or bust category in terms of making the NCAA tournament. But if they do get there, boy, nobody is going to want to face them. I can promise you that. They're at Oregon State next, followed by a home game against those St. Mary's Gales.
Andy, getting back to the Big Ten, it's Michigan State atop these standings. They're the lone remaining undefeated team. They're sitting at 7-0 right now. But right behind them, Michigan, 6-1, Purdue, 7-2. Well, here's the fun thing. Those Wolverines are at the Boilermakers tonight. Number 21, Michigan, at 11, Purdue, 8 p.m. Eastern on Fox. FanDuel has it. Boiler up, -3.5. Andy, I love games like this where it's like, it's not, I love a top of the standings games, but this is we're trying to keep pace with the top of the standings, keep pace with Tom Izzo's club. I really, really am intrigued to see this Michigan at Purdue matchup. Can you imagine if this was this year's Michigan front court against last year's Purdue front court, and we could have Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden trying to do work against Mr. Edey and TKR? Like, that would have been so fun. Still going to be a super fun front court matchup, though, as TKR is still part of that equation. Andy, how do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, it's going to be really fun to see how Michigan responds on the road here. Purdue, very, very good at home, but they did just struggle in that home game recently against Ohio State. So we'll see if Michigan can give Purdue another loss at home this year. I do like Purdue in this one, but they're so reliant on their big three. The depth outside of that has been an issue for Purdue this year. When Braden Smith has an off shooting night like he did against Ohio State, even if Trey Kaufman-Wren's great, even if Fletcher Loyer, I think he had 16 in that game, even when those things happen, if you're not getting enough from the Cameron Heides and the CJ Coxes of the world, like, you've seen that hurt this team. And I think they had, if I'm remembering correctly, I think they had 17 points from players not named Kaufman-Wren, Smith, and Loyer in that game against Ohio State. So they need some more depth. We need to see who steps up to defend either Wolf or Golden. We know Trey Kaufman-Wren will probably be on Golden, is my guess. So how do they defend Danny Wolf? Are they able to slow him down from being the playmaking big that he's been so good at in that role this year? So it's going to be interesting. I think I have a hard time betting against Purdue at home, even though they just lost to Ohio State. I recognize that may seem silly, but they're very good historically at Mackey. So I like the Boilermakers in this one because they're at home, because the guard play with Smith and Loyer is so good. But Michigan presents really, really challenging issues just with those two big lineups, and I think Purdue is going to struggle to defend that.
And it's funny, Andy, this is one of those situations where both of these teams, having recently dropped a game they probably shouldn't have, the Minnesota loss for Michigan, and then the one you were just the Ohio State loss for Purdue you're just talking about. It's like, now that puts both of these teams in a situation where it's like, man, we now cannot afford this loss. Well, one of them's got to eat it and drop in the standings, and that's going to be tough. Andy, very quickly, two other games I just want to mention for tonight. Villanova at number 10 Marquette, 7 p.m. Eastern on FS1. FanDuel's got it Marquette -9.5. Marquette's shown a little vulnerability lately for me, Andy, but frankly, even though Villanova's made some strides, they have too. Ultimately, I would have Marquette straight up in this thing. 9.5 is a big number, even though they're at home. I might have a little trouble going with that. So give me Marquette to win, but I'm going to go Villanova to cover this thing. And by the way, I think Purdue going back does cover that 3.5 point spread. Give me Boilermakers by 5 in that one. And then we also got a just keep your eye on it game, at least for me, Andy. UCLA traveling up to Washington tonight. Again, it shouldn't be a thing. The Bruins are favored by 5.5, but Andy, keep your eyes on the Fightin' Mick Bruins and what they do on the road.
Well, Isaac, so far so good for Auburn without star center Johni Broome, but if he misses again on Saturday, well, they're playing a whole different level of competition. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But first, folks, today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Attending NFL playoff games is an experience unlike any other. The energy, the excitement, and the connection with other fans is unmatched. I remember the thrill of seeing my favorite team clinch a playoff win live. It is a memory that I will never, ever forget. This year, Game Time makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, Game Time Picks. It filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters most, being there. I used Game Time Picks to grab tickets a few weeks ago for Purdue at Oregon. I talked about that game on the show. It was a really fun game, despite the fact that neither team could figure out how to put the ball through the net. It could not have been easier to get those tickets. I found a super deal. They gave me incredible value for amazing seats, and I could even preview the view from my spot before buying them. The all-in pricing is a game changer. No surprise fees at checkout. Plus, I knew my tickets were backed by the Game Time guarantee, which gave me complete peace of mind giving them out as a Christmas gift for my dad. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app now, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, we got 3 ranked, unranked games going on Saturday that we're going to preview here in the second segment before we talk about a handful of other fun matchups that we got going on this weekend as well. 2 of these 3 games are in the SEC. No surprise there. Most of the ranked on ranked matchups for the rest of the year are going to be in the SEC just because of how many of those teams are in the top 25 and teams that keep rotating in and out of the top 25 like Mizzou and Ole Miss, who are both in the top 25 right now. We'll see how that looks on Monday, but we'll start with the other SEC ranked on ranked game, Isaac. Number 6 Tennessee going on the road to face Bruce Pearl and the number 1 Auburn Tigers. This game is at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN on Saturday. FanDuel given the edge to the Tigers right now by 6.5 points. The key factor for this game is, of course, whether Johni Broome, who has missed the last couple of games, will return for this game from his injury. Bruce Pearl said, quote, "It's a possibility." He said that regarding this game. John Rothstein said that he's been, quote, "moving around a little in Thursday's practice, but was not a full go." So we're still waiting to see if that ankle injury is healed for Johni Broome. Obviously, Auburn has escaped the last few games without Broome, but it's a whole different ballgame when you're playing a team in Tennessee that was the last remaining undefeated team in college basketball and was at the time the number 1 ranked team in the country.
Yeah, and it's so funny. I remember when he suffered this injury back against South Carolina, we kind of circled this game as like, we were told, hey, it might be 2 games before he's back. And then they've had a week off. They didn't play midweek this week. They played Georgia last Saturday, and now they have this game. So it's like, okay, if it really is 2 games plus a full week after that, maybe this Saturday. Mm-hmm. The way Coach Pearl's talking, man, I just don't see it happening. Yeah. And again, despite the magnitude of this matchup, it's not worth it for the long-term prospects of what Auburn has in front of them. You drop a game to Tennessee, who cares ultimately, because it's a game to another top 10 team in the country. And yes, I recognize like you don't want to lose any games and this is a home game, fine, sure, whatever. But ultimately, if you take your second loss of the season against Tennessee and it means giving Johni Broome more time to return so that you can be in better shape for the postseason, which is what ultimately matters, that's good for them. But that said, Andy, I've been so impressed how Auburn has navigated this. They thrashed Mississippi State, who was ranked 15th at the time, by 22 points without Johni Broome. They had a tougher time at Georgia last week. It was looking good for most of the game. Had to hold on in the end. They were a tip-in short of having to go to overtime, but held on against the number 23 ranked Bulldogs. So that alone has been wildly encouraging. That's been the silver lining we were potentially hoping for. But again, unless Johni Broome is hitting the threshold you wanted to see to bring him back, I wouldn't even think about playing him in this basketball game, even if it means taking just your second loss of the season.
Yeah, it's worth a loss, even a home loss. If the alternative is even a slight chance or a decent chance that Broome playing re-aggravates his injury and causes him to miss the rest of the regular season, or of course missing any time into the NCAA tournament, I mean, that would be catastrophic for Auburn. This team's ability to hang on and win games against teams like Georgia and Mississippi State, who, no disrespect, they're very good teams. They're both NCAA tournament teams. They were both ranked at the time, but you do not win a national championship without Johni Broome, or at least it's very unlikely. But your chances of winning a championship with Broome are pretty high comparatively. So you have to have him healthy for that. And you're still going to get a super high seed. You're still going to be a really highly regarded program if you lose a game at home to the 6th ranked team in the country. So you have to be willing to take that gamble and not go with him. I mean, we'll see. Obviously, they know more about his health and his current status than we do. But I think if the risk is too high, you won't see him play. And it's unfortunate because it makes what's an incredibly exciting game between 2 of the best teams in the sport a little less exciting if Broome is not playing. But the ability for Auburn to potentially win this game against a great team, even without their star player, would really solidify. I mean, I don't know if you can be more solid than the fact that Auburn got every first place vote in the AP voting last week. But if they beat Tennessee without Broome, that's going to be the case again, unquestionably for this team.
And Andy, think about, in particular to this matchup, where is Tennessee's strength?
Yeah, it's in the backcourt.
Exactly. And so it's like you're not depending on Broome as much anyway. So can Chaney Johnson, can Dylan Cardwell continue to hold things down in the front court against, not Tennessee's greatest strength? So that helps as well. Andy, let's switch over to the Big 12. We got number 7 Houston at number 12 Kansas, 6:30 p.m. on ESPN. This is Saturday night. Ken Palm, we don't have the FanDuel line for this one yet. Andy, I forgot to say, you think Auburn's going to win and cover 6.5?
Oh, yeah, but man, 6.5 is really tight. Auburn's going to win. I think they're going to cover, but gosh, I feel like it's going to be like a 4 to 6 point game, or maybe like a 6 to 8 point game. So it's going to be right in that mix.
Tennessee covers. Give me that. Houston and Kansas, 6:30 tomorrow night, Saturday, ESPN. Ken Palm has it. Houston -1. The Cougs favored on the road at Kansas. What? Yeah, that's the thing, Andy. A crazy note from you here. When we think about Houston's resume, Andy, drop this bombshell on the good people.
Yeah, so Houston does not have any quad one wins, and it's a silly thing because there was a discourse around this. I talked about it on the show earlier this week. I saw it discussed on college basketball subreddit, and like the discussion was happening basically right after West Virginia, who's 37th at the net. If they're top 30, they would be a quad one win for Houston. And Central Florida, who's 77th at the net, they need to be top 75 for that to be a quad one win. 3 days before this conversation happened, Houston had 2 quad one wins. But then West Virginia lost and Central Florida lost, and they fell out of that quad one conversation. So now Houston's resume, as we're currently recording this, shows that they don't have any quad one wins. It's part of the fallacy of using quad one or quad data in the middle of a season. Ultimately, how the season ends and where those teams finish is what ultimately matters. So Houston, they obviously have an opportunity to pick up what'll be a no doubt, unquestionable quad one win if they beat Kansas. But there's a chance they'll pick up quad one wins without doing anything different going forward this season. If Central Florida picks up some wins, if West Virginia picks up some wins. So it's kind of part of the, I don't want to say ridiculousness because I understand the quad settings and I understand why they use it, but it's part of why trying to look at them in the middle of a season is a little bit misleading because Houston probably has, I don't think the difference between Houston being 2-3 in the quad one and 0-3 in the quad one setting when they already beat 2 teams that were right in the mix just really matters all that much. Houston's a phenomenal team. They blow out teams unlike anybody else. I know Utah's not a great team, but what they did to them a few days ago was just incredibly horrifying. They held them to 36 points. I mean, just an absolute disgusting victory for Kelvin Sampson and the Cougs. They had 26 turnovers for Utah, I believe, in that game. They had 19 steals. Just a masterclass defensively from that team. I like them going into this game against Kansas. Kansas has been inconsistent. The transfers they've brought in have not exactly stepped up at the level they've needed them to. Zeke Mayo's been very good and for the most part consistent, but AJ Storr has not. Rylan Griffin has not. Diggy Coit has not. Shaquille Moore has not. So they just haven't really been able to get, you don't know where their offense is going to come from night in and night out. And if they don't have that on lock in this game, if they spend the first 8 minutes of the contest trying to figure out who's the hot hand, who's going to get us the points, Houston might already have done enough to win that basketball game just because of how much they can put the clamps on people. So I like Houston in this game. I think this is a really good opportunity for them to just say, unquestionably, we are the team to beat in this conference. We're still undefeated. If they beat Kansas, they will be 8-0 in the conference. We now have, a really great road win on our resume. And at that point, they'll be them and Iowa State certainly will be the teams to beat in the conference.
What's interesting about this matchup, Andy, is we think whether folks realize it or not, Houston now has ascended to their usual position. They're number 1 in Ken Palm defensive efficiency. But one of the things for Houston is that they just simply don't get to the free throw line very much. They're 341st nationally in free throw rate. But guess what, Andy? It's even worse for Kansas. They are literally dead last in all of Division I, 364th in free throw rate. You match that inability to get to the line with Houston's highly ranked defense, and that's not a good concoction for a victory in Fog Island, man. What a win this would be for Houston. Again, I'm really curious to see what the actual FanDuel line is when it comes out, but we'll see what happens. Andy, you mentioned it earlier, very quickly skating by. Ole Miss, number 16 at 22. Mizzou, 6 p.m. Saturday night, SEC Network. Ken Palm has it. Mizzou -1. Both of these teams are coming off of losses. For Ole Miss, that heartbreaking loss at home to Texas A&M earlier this week with WT4 back in the mix. They've got back-to-back losses because remember, they lost to Mississippi State in OT last Saturday. So really, really, really need this win on the road in Columbia. But Mizzou also coming off a loss. They were down in Austin earlier this week and lost. So either a 3-game losing streak for Ole Miss or Mizzou's going up to 2. Something's got to give here, and we'll keep our eyes what happens. All right, Andy. Not only do we have these 3 ranked teams on the road, but there are 9 other ranked teams on the road this weekend. These 9, though, are going to face unranked opponents. Who is most likely to be upset? Who, though, can avoid those landmines? What are going to be the other must-watch games of the weekend? We're going to tell you all that coming up in just a second. Saturday afternoon, or it's afternoon, all day Saturday, we've got 17 ranked teams in action, 12 total ranked teams on the road. We just talked about 3 of them, so there's 9 others. Andy, I'm going to rattle these off, and I want you to tell me who's in the most trouble. Who's going to step on that landmine and blow up on Saturday? I'm just going to go chronologically through the day so you can think about your quad boxes on YouTube TV or whatever. No free ads. I apologize. Number 14, Mississippi State at South Carolina. Number 8, Michigan State. Remember, undefeated in Big Ten play. They got to go play those 2 freshmen at Rutgers Saturday afternoon. Sparty -6 at Ken Palm. Number 3, Iowa State. Excuse me, on the road at Arizona State. Cyclones -9. These are all Ken Palm lines. We don't have FanDuel yet. Number 9, Kentucky at Vandy. Ken Palm has a Big Blue Nation -2. A&M. 13th ranked at Texas. Remember, this was Texas's first SEC game ever, was going on the road to A&M. Now they get the return game. A&M -1. 15, Oregon at Minnesota. Can the blonde highlighted bomber Dawson Garcia do it again? A game winner from half court. OU -5. Duke, number 2 at Wake Forest. Blue Devils -13. West Virginia 23rd at K-State. West Virginia -2. And UConn, number 19, going on the road to Xavier, Andy. Ken Palm has it. How about this? Musketeers -2. Who's going to step on that landmine?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to start with the one game where Ken Palm has the unranked team favored. That's, of course, that final game there. Xavier at home against a UConn team that stumbled, particularly offensively without Liam McNeely in the mix. He's been missing a lot of time with that injury, and we've seen UConn's offense really sputter without him. And it hasn't even been the fault of like Jalen Stewart, who stepped up and played pretty well without him. Solo Ball has stepped up and played pretty well without McNeely in the mix. But McNeely is such a focal point for this team offensively. And we've I think Leaf talked about it on our episode on Wednesday, kind of talked about how UConn is forced to be a little bit more reliant on Alex Caravan, who's an incredibly talented player, but was never really asked to be the focal point offensively. And it just isn't really, I don't want to say he's not equipped for that role, but UConn's ceiling is lower when he's in that role. I think he's better as the 2nd or 3rd or even 4th offensive option, which is what we've seen from those 2 national championship teams. And now when he's taking on a bigger role offensively, it just isn't quite clicking as well for this team. And Xavier has had some great opportunities. They've picked up some big wins. They beat Marquette. They've played some great basketball. They had a great opportunity to beat St. John's a few days ago and were just unable to get it done, losing in overtime in that game to the team that is now in first place in the Big East in St. John's. So Xavier's they're capable of playing with anybody in this league. Offensively, they are fantastic when they are at full strength. Zach Fremantle is going to be an issue for UConn, for Samson Johnson and Terrace Reed to have to defend, and that backcourt is very talented. So I like Xavier to win this one. I think they're more than capable of taking down Danny Hurley and UConn. There's a lot of other matchups in here I really like. I'll toss out Texas hosting A&M. A&M is an inconsistent team. We saw them coming off a huge win over Ole Miss, a game where they were not leading until the final 13 seconds of that game, which was an incredible comeback for Buzz Williams' team. We're still seeing Wade Taylor and Zurich Phelps we're seeing Wade Taylor get back into action after missing some time. Phelps had some illness as well. Both those guys, I think, combined to shoot 0 of 11 from 3 against Ole Miss, which made the fact that they won that game even more impressive. Meanwhile, Texas coming off a nice win over Mizzou. We saw their bench step up in a way that we haven't seen in a while. I think they scored 15 points as a unit against Mizzou. So Texas, they're going to want to win this game. They're at home. They're against a in-state rival. So I think that Texas has a real chance to knock off A&M and kind of stall that momentum for the Aggies coming off that big win over Ole Miss.
Texas's bench scoring 15 is still wildly absurd to me.
Yeah.
So Andy, here's the thing about UConn. Do you remember what the big issue was we talked about for them coming off of Maui and why things were not going well? What specific part of their team was struggling?
Well, they were having issues in the backcourt. They're having issues shooting the 3-ball. I know that.
Yes. And then the other thing was their defense, right?
Yeah.
It was like things are not going well. Well, right now, have you checked this recently at Ken Palm? They are 8th in offensive efficiency. Andy, they are 132nd in defensive efficiency. I mean, that spread is insane to me. The reason
Clinton's not walking through that door.
No. And the reason I bring that back up is because that was Kentucky and Alabama's issue through much of last season. If we remember, they were both highly ranked offensive efficiency, like not good, like near 100 in terms of defensive efficiency. We've talked so much about the numbers on that kind of data and how those teams just cannot win national championships. Alabama figured some defensive stuff out, made the Final Four. I bring that up because Kentucky is in that same boat yet again this season. Big Blue Nation, Andy, I've just lost Kentucky. Here we go. They are right now 3rd in offensive efficiency, but 80th in defensive efficiency. That's the big bugaboo for Mark Pope's team. And that's why I'm going to have them on landmine alert as they go to Nashville and have to take on Vandy, a Vandy team that, by the way, is much improved, is looking good, has some like nice little wins under their belt. If we're being honest, they're 47th at Ken Palm. Yes, they're coming off a loss to Alabama, but let's remember last Saturday, they beat Tennessee. So that was at home. Can they do it again in back-to-back weeks? What a story that would be to knock off Tennessee and then Big Blue Nation in back-to-back Saturdays, Andy. Let's watch for that one.
I got one more that I want to talk about here. It is the game that Ken Palm has the biggest line on, the most likely team going on the road to win. That's Duke at Wake Forest. I bring it up because Wake Forest has beat Duke at home the last couple of years. You may remember the Kyle Filipowski fiasco last year where he was still on the floor when the Wake Forest students ran onto the floor.
That's right. That was the Wake game.
Yeah, that was the Wake game. Yeah, so Wake Forest 7-1 in the ACC, coming off a win over North Carolina, a team that they had some stumbles early in the year. They haven't looked particularly great, if we're being honest, but they have a solid record in the ACC. They have a little bit of momentum right now. They have some great veteran talent in Hunter Salas, in Cam Hildreth, in Afton Reed. Like, this is a team that has some experience. They've beat Duke before. It's a game to keep an eye on. I think Duke's going to win. I think that they are heads and shoulders above Wake Forest right now because they're head and shoulders above everybody in the ACC, the way that they've been playing. But this is far, far and away one of the more difficult road games that they're going to play the rest of the season, and it's definitely one to keep an eye on.
Andy, 2 other SEC teams in action that are ranked anyway on Saturday. Georgia at number 5, Florida. Florida had a struggle midweek, came back and won in miraculous fashion. In the football side of things, this is the South's biggest cocktail party, so we'll see what happens there. LSU visiting number 4, Alabama as well. Andy, I want to quickly tease 2 games that are kind of funny to me, both of which I'm calling somebody's got to win games. Oklahoma had a great start to the season, and then they did exactly what they did last year. They're now 1-4 in SEC play. Arkansas, speaking of miraculous comebacks, came back and won their first SEC game of the season. You talked about that earlier this week. They are 1-5 in SEC play. Somebody's going to pick up their second SEC win, Andy. Is it going to be the team that started hot this season overall and has struggled in conference play, or Arkansas? Well, that game is 8:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2 Saturday. Ken Palm has it. Arkansas -2. The other somebody's got to win, DePaul. Could they pick up, Andy, their second Big East win? They're at Butler. Both teams are 1-win Big East teams. That's 4 p.m. Saturday on CBS Sports Network.
Looking to Sunday, we got a lot of good games going on there as well. Ranked teams, Nebraska going on the road at Wisconsin. That game's at 1 p.m. Eastern time on the Big Ten Network. Memphis also playing on Sunday. They are hosting UAB, the Blazers, also at 1 p.m. on ESPN2. And then Northwestern going on the road at Illinois. That game at 3 p.m. also on the Big Ten Network. And then if we're talking unranked games on Sunday to keep an eye on, we got another one in the Big Ten. As I've been saying on the show, the gift that keeps on giving, the Big Ten giving us solid matchups every single day. That one, we got Maryland at Indiana at noon. That game will be on CBS.
Dude, Queen and Ballo? That's fun.
That is going to be a blast. And folks, this incredible slate of Saturday, we got a ton of games to get to, and we're going to recap them all on our game night special episode. If you haven't checked this out, Leaf Tulane, our regular guest on Wednesdays, he is hosting a Saturday night show live at the end of the day after the games are over. Usually Isaac and I join him. We have a fun conversation recapping all of the games on Saturday and talking about just what happened in the games. And then on Monday, Isaac and I come back and kind of give you some big picture analysis. Check it out wherever you get podcasts, wherever you're listening to this, you'll be able to find that show live on Saturday evenings. But that is going to wrap wrap it up for us today here on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Another fantastic slate of games coming your way this weekend. So again, have fun watching the games. Check us out on Saturday night, recapping the games, and then giving you the big picture analysis on Monday. As always, though, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes. Cheers to the Mick Bruins and their game against Washington. And until Saturday night, and then again next Monday, peace out.